Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face, my card making space. Another cute card using a mixture of wafer die sets. One of the die sets is new. The rest are kind of oldie but goodie favorites. The new one being the Cuddly Bunny, which I've already used, and I'll have a link to that video in the end screen at the end of the video. But yeah, I combined them with some oldie but goodie favorites, one of the new background stamps, all the things to make a really fun little birthday card and a fun way to add texture with markers. So, as always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps pay the bills, keeps the heaters running, keeps the channel going, all the things. And that's it for the chatter. Let's get into making the card. Okay, so here's all of the die sets I'm planning on using. I've got the hanging leaf ring, the little cuddly bunny, pocket full of mushrooms. I didn't end up using that Hugs wafer die. I changed course, and I'll get to that later in the video, and then the pretty bows. So I did all my die cutting first, and I die cut almost everything from Simon Says Stamps, smooth white, 120 pound cardstock. And I showed this trick before. I just stuck some low tack tape behind that little portion of the bunny die cut so I could stick those little eye and nose pieces to that, because you guys know those little pieces like to just disappear so easily. So yeah, sometimes I'll stick them to my grip mat, but I found that sticking it to the tape, just because that's just that easy C tape or whatever, and it is very low tack, but I think just having that like little bit of purple background to those pieces just keeps me from losing them, because the amount of times, and then you have to re-die cut and it's annoying. Anyway, I stuck the pieces to my grip mat, and I am using Simon's Pawsitively saturated inks to do my ink blending, and I used cookie, gingerbread, and cocoa inks for my little bunny, and for the little ears I used bubblegum ink. And this time I'm just using my little Waffle Flower Shader 1 Plus brushes that I've shown in a ton of videos. Oh, so many good brush options, you guys. I just kind of grab things at random. Like all the things, do you need multiple sets of blending brushes? No. I do this as a job. I have multiple sets. I also just have a weird curiosity. So anytime a brand releases new ones, I'm like, ooh, I need those. I don't know. Anyway, adding texture. Copic markers. Doesn't have to be Copics. Doesn't have to be alcohol markers, really. When doing this, after I've done my ink blending and then just using markers to add little dots for texture, pretty much any marker would work for this. I just grabbed Copics because they're right in front of me and it was quick and easy. And I just add little dots and I just vary the pressure. A little bit more pressure gets me a bigger dot, and then so you just lighten up to get the different little sizes, and I just add them randomly. And it just is a way to add more like definition, a little bit of texture to your die cuts or stamped images, because I've done that with stamped images too when I've colored them in and then decided to go back with my markers and just add those little dots here and there. It's just a way to change things up a bit. It is also a good way to, if you do have little like mistakes or a little like smudge where you don't want it, add a few little dots on top and then you're good to go. So after I'd added all my little dots, I assembled my little bunny. Like, look at him. He's so ridiculously cute, and he's tiny, but he's not like minuscule, My previous video when I used him, I partnered him with my go-to favorite, the Mushroom Stems wafer dies. And like I said, I'll have that link to that video in the end screen at the end of this one. But this time I'm gonna partner him with really tiny little mushrooms, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the other die cutting, or this little batch, this is from the hanging leaf ring die set, which I've used in previous videos as well. I love this die set. I love it. I don't know. There's just something about this die set. So same thing, die cut these greenery pieces from the same white cardstock. And then I'm using two different combos of green inks. I've talked about this a lot. When you're dealing with like greenery, whether you're doing ink blending or if you're just die cutting from color cardstock, whatever it is, when you're dealing with green pieces, stems, leaves, yada, 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 mix up the greens. You don't want them all the same. The variation brings more interest. Plus, in real life, there's a bajillion different types of green. So I use 2 different ink trios, and like always, I'll have them linked in the description box below for these different green pieces. So it just gives them a different look. And after I did that, I just rotated my mat, and then the flowers are from the same hanging leaf ring, and I just die cut a bunch of scraps with these, so I had extras. And for these, I'm gonna do some of them with this warm purple trio, so lilac, orchid, and amethyst. And I just start with the color like right in the center, and then just kind of swirl the brush out to mostly cover. And I just, like with everything else, I was going lightest to darkest. So I start with my lightest shade and then go in with the medium, and then I go in with the darkest just to build that dimension. And like I always say, all of these inks do soften a bit. They smooth out, which is wonderful, so I don't have to worry too much about getting my blends perfect. They also, though, soften and dry back a bit. So always, if you have a very specific look you're going for, just test it out in scrap cardstock. Add your ink, blend a bit of color onto it, let it fully dry and see where it goes. With these, I wasn't going for anything like specific. I was just picking colors at random and having fun with it. So I decided on like a purple and aqua color combo because that'll play nicely with the rose gold accents I'm going to add later. So I used one of my favorite trios for these aqua colors, which was Seafoam, Surf, and Ocean. And same thing, just blended from the centers, pulled it out. And then the little bow from the Pretty Bows die set I had die cut from white cardstock. I started with charcoal ink. Yes, charcoal ink. And then I pulled in a black ink. And this black was the Rainbow Splash black ink. And it just builds depth. That is one of the perks of doing all of this on white cardstock. I skip back and forth between it. It's just fun ways to mix up working with wafer dies. Sometimes it's color cardstock and I leave it flat. Other times it's color cardstock and I blend inks onto them. Other times it's white cardstock like this, and that gives you, the ability to build as much dimension and color as you want. Sky's the limit. It's the fun of it. So then I'm using the Pocket Full of Mushrooms die set. These just little teeny tiny mushrooms. I have done a video using these. That'll be another one I'll link to in the end screen. I use them in a live stream, and they're cute. They're just cute. And they're little. So the undersides and the stems I blended with flannel ink. And then the mushroom caps, I went with the cool tone purples. So that's Heather, Violet, and Iris inks. And again, I started with the lightest and then added the medium shade, and then I'll go in with the darkest shade. And they're just, look how cute these are. So super easy to assemble. You just adhere the stem, adhere the little mushroom cap. That's it. Really simple. So after I assemble these little mushrooms, I also am going to double up on those flowers that I had blended. I was like all over the place when I was making this. I was having fun. It's fun. There's something about like ink blending on cardstock pieces that, who'da thunk? I talked about this in other videos too, about like when like standalone wafer dies really started becoming a thing. I was kind of like not really into it. Now there's some of my favorite things to do is create all these little pieces. Some of them big, little, big, whatever. Creating all these little die cut pieces and then creating little like scenes and arrangements and all the things. It's fun. So I assembled my little mushrooms. I doubled up on these bigger flowers, and then same thing. I pulled out some Copic markers to add these little dots in texture. Just simple. And like I said, any marker works for this. It doesn't have to be Copic. Any alcohol marker would work. It's another one of those things where you just got to test it. Some of the ones I would grab ended up being like too light on top of the ink color, but yeah, it doesn't matter though. This isn't, I'm not doing any blending or anything like that. I'm just making dots. So any sort of like marker that's going to make a dot, that'll work. So the other thing to remember is if you're doing that on die cuts like this, like these flowers that have all that piercing detail in them, regardless of what you're using, just be aware that the color will seep through that piercing detail, and you see it, like it gets on my glasswork surface. I'm not worried about that. That's, I'll wipe that off. It's not a big deal. But it's something to just keep in mind that if you're wanting to add like texture like this, whether you're using markers, you can do it with paint, anything. If there's that piercing detail that goes through the cardstock, it can seep into that and it might go a little funny. So that's another thing to just maybe test out, because sometimes whatever you're adding can not only just like seeping through as whatever, but I'm talking about like it could like travel along the pierce lines. So instead of a dot, you'll end up just with like a long, weird, smeared line, if that makes sense. It's just something I thought I would mention. But yeah, like I said, I got onto my work surface, I wiped it off, and then moved on. So for the bow, instead of adding dots, I decided to just color with a couple of the Copic markers to kind of define the little areas of the bow, just to give it that little bit of extra depth. And I like how that turned out. It just sort of worked. So I started with the darker, blended it out with this neutral 7, just really, really dark gray, and built that little bit of dimension. And then I was going to say I pulled out the Pepita background again. I haven't even bothered putting it away. I've used this in so many videos recently. Any sort of like geometric background will work. This one's just the current fixation. And I put it onto copy paper. You're not really going to, even on camera, you can hardly see it. I could hardly see it in real life because I'm using such a light ink. This is that seafoam ink, so that lightest aqua shade. And I'm adding the ink with a blending brush. And I didn't fully cover. I wanted that just sort of random surface like that. Just like so. So I just press the blending brush into the ink, apply it to the stamp, and that's it. And I've done this in other videos with this stamp and with other stamps, and done multiple colors, things like that. So the copy paper just gives me the white background so I can kind of see. Obviously, it works better with darker colors to like see where you've applied the ink. But yeah, I did the same thing on the inside of the card, which is going to be a top folding A2 white note card. We'll come back to the inside in a minute. And then my background here is, I trimmed it down. It's now like 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and rose gold. So I pulled out Simon Says Stamps rose gold cardstock. I don't use this very often because I normally just reach for the gold always. And this one was peeking out, and I was like, I haven't used this in a while. It's pretty. So I had die cut the ring from the hanging leaf ring from that rose gold cardstock, and then I added that black thread because I can't leave it just like floating. It needs to be like actually hanging from something. I have issues, you guys. So I just added that, taped it to the back. And then I'm just going to start adhering all these little bits to build this little like scene / like hanging leaf ring. So I'm just adding adhesive like kind of to the spines of all these little greenery pieces. So the leaves are, popped up a little bit. It helps build a bit of dimension. And I had kind of roughly laid everything out off camera to give me an idea of where I was going to place everything. And then, yeah, I'm gonna place my little bunny there so that everything else I place isn't going to like fully cover him up, because he's the star of the show. And I just used a mixture of craft tacky glue, and then here and there where needed, I was like sticking little bits of like foam adhesive behind some of these little things. So I added my little mushrooms. I've got my little florals. Sometimes just cut things apart. It's another thing, just edit your die cuts. Snip things apart with scissors, whether it's to make them tuck in or just to actually change the look of it. Why not? So tucked my little bunny in there. Like seriously, like look how cute he is. He's little, but he's just like the perfect size to go with so many of these little die cuts. I just love him. So I adhered my little bow. Love it. And then I'm going to add splatter, of course. So I put this into my splat box. I've got my white gouache. So I put a little bit of that on my palette. I'm going to add a bit of water to this just to thin it out so I can actually splatter with it. And then I'm going to add quite a bit of this, like quite a bit of splatter to this card front. Because even on like the white cardstock, you still can see it, So It also, you can still see it because my white gouache isn't like fully white, because a lot of times I'm using dirty paint water to thin it out. Doesn't matter. So use my fan brush, added the splatter, let it dry, and then I'm adding just a little bit of black splatter with my black gouache. Not a ton, just a bit, you know, because I do like my black splatter. So I go a little lighter handed with this though, because it can get pretty overwhelming pretty quickly. So thin that out as well with a bit of water, and then I think I did pretty good for once. It's hard. It is literally hard for me. I have to like mentally tell myself like, okay, just back off. You don't need to cover the entire card front with the splatter. So just added a bit, let that dry. And then for my flower centers, you could use like little gems, sequins, anything like that. I've done that before. But this time I used the actual hanging leaf ring, the little top portion of it, because that little leftover piece is a circle. And then I pulled out a very oldie but goodie favorite set, just the mini flowers and leaves wafer die. That die set came out like a decade ago, I think. And I just used that to die cut scraps of that rose gold cardstock. So I've got all these little circles that I can use for my flower centers. And that also just matches, of course, with the leaf ring. So it just kind of brings in, because I did cover up a lot of it with all my little flowers and greenery and bunny and, you know. So I just adhered those into place, again, with just little dabs of craft tacky glue. So that build all my little flower centers. So even though I'm sure if I dug through my stash, I probably have like, you know, confetti or embellishments that would have been a perfect match as well. But this is one way to get around that. So then for my sentiment, like I said, I didn't use that Hugs wafer die in the beginning. Instead, I pulled out CZ Designs Birthday Basics set and just took one of the small sentiments from the set. And I'm going to heat emboss this onto a piece of white cardstock. And I'm going to use, this is Ink on 3's Strawberry Champagne Embossing Powder. I've shown this in past videos. It's been a hot minute since I've used it. I can't remember the last time I've used this stuff. It's another one of those things where it's like, oh, I forgot I had this, even though I have a massive container of it. This stuff's pretty, and it goes very, very well with this rose gold specialty cardstock. So I like when I find, you know, random products that just match so nicely. So I heat embossed that sentiment with that Strawberry Champagne embossing powder, and then I'll trim that down with my paper trimmer just off camera. And then the inside of my card, like I said, my card base is a top folding A2 white note card, 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I stamped another one of the sentiments from that Birthday Basics set with just the black ink onto the inside. And then I had a few more little die cuts from the beginning. So I'm just going to adhere those to the inside just to finish it off, because there were too many to fit on the card front, but then I'll just use them on the inside, just like so. So I adhered the little flowers and that little greenery piece. And then I had more of those little scraps of the rose gold that I had die cut. So use those to finish off the little flower centers. And then that finished off the inside of the card. And then the sentiment strip, I trimmed down, added a couple little foam squares just to even everything out. And then I can just pop that right into place, just like so. And then I just adhere this to my card base, and that finished off this card. I decided not to add any other bling. I think this just worked with the splatter and the texture and the dots and all the things. So, like I mentioned, I'll have links to those videos I talked about. Those will be in the end screen at the very end. And then everything I use will be listed and linked in the description box below. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping and commenting. It helps a ton. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!